Sometimes we know that food can be unhealthy, but at other times there's certain foods that actually have a gray area and we don't know if they're healthy or not. And most of the time, there's people like doctors or influencers that don't really know too much about these things, and they want to tell us how we should start eating. And normally what this causes is that we start getting scared of whether what we're eating is right or wrong, and we think that there's only one way to diet, which is not true at all. And recently, I saw a video from a guy named Dr. Berg that was trying to do the same thing with protein bars. And that's why in this video, we're gonna uncover 3 important points about protein bars so you understand them more and how you can actually start using protein bars to help you get the physique that you want and be confident in your body. And the first thing that is important to address is that Dr. Berg brings up this thing about how protein bars are allegedly just as bad as candy bars right here.
A lot of these bars are comparable to a candy bar.
So for him, he wants to address that protein bars are just as bad as candy bars, but really guys, I think he's kind of overreacting in a way. And because, for example, the protein bars that he has in this video, if you decide to watch it, is that he generally picks the worst protein bars in what you actually should have in terms of a good protein bar. And not all protein bars are treated equal. So for example, a lot of times when you get a candy bar from the store, no matter which candy bar you pick, there are generally not a lot of good options, even if it's Whole Foods or like if you go to Target or any other place, it's not gonna give you the best options. But if you pick a certain protein bar, there's definitely a lot of better protein bars than candy bars. So when you're making this comparison, it's really important to know what you're comparing a protein bar to in terms of this candy bar. So in his own video, he brings up Snickers bars. And in this case, we're gonna do the same thing. And we're gonna bring up the macros right here for the Snickers bar. And if you compare this to the second part of this, which is the Bear bar that I'm bringing up, the macros are roughly different in certain situations. So for example, Bear generally has a lot less saturated fat. There's definitely a lot more protein. And one other thing is that there's generally more fiber in certain bars than others. And there's also less calories. And that is the biggest culprit for this, is that he doesn't really address that calories is the main things that make you lose weight or gain weight, not the amount of sugar that you have. For him, he likes to address that there's so much things such as like glycemic index and sugar, which we'll get into in a second, but in reality, that's not what's gonna make you gain weight. The thing that's really gonna make you gain weight is overeating, and there's a big psychological effect for things like candy bars compared to protein bars. How many times have you seen someone eat 6 candy bars on Halloween when you're going out and trick-or-treating, or let's say you're at a party doing that? Yeah, there's a lot of times you'll probably see that, but I don't really see anyone binge eating 6 protein bars or like anything else compared to it. So on a psychological effect, I've definitely seen a lot more people do that than the others. So it makes sense to go to something that is the least addictive possible, which generally is a protein bar. So as long as you're a person that's conscious about calorie tracking and you're also focusing on hitting your macros, such as your protein, fats, and carbs, there's not much of an issue you really have to deal with here. So even though in terms of macros that they generally are better for you compared to something like a protein bar, what about the ingredients? Is that what's gonna make you gain weight? Are you unhealthy because you're doing that? Well, the answer is a little bit shocking to you.
The starches that turn into sugar so quick, they really are sugars.
So for Dr. Berg, he brings up that processed man-made ingredients in protein bars are the reasons why that they're so unhealthy and that they're bad. And truth be told, there are a lot of protein bars in the market that I would agree there's generally not a lot of good things, and they generally are processed just like candy bar. But except a lot of things that he brings up, for example, starches, I don't really understand why that he's bringing up the big thing, especially if you're focusing on the macro. But if you're focusing on ingredients, he brings up things such as like starches that they're basically sugar. And to some extent, yes, some of them are instant sugars that are basically treated like sugars. But there are some that he brings up like sucralose, maltitol, and other types of sweeteners that he says that they're bad for you. But truth be told, there's been a lot of times where artificial sweeteners are actually just not that bad for you. For example, like I would much rather have something like erythritol or sucralose than straight up just cane syrup, because I can't metabolize sucralose. You can't actually digest some of these things. So hence why certain things like sugar alcohols, it's not that big of a deal. So I wouldn't stress so much out on that. And in terms of sweeteners, normally what happens is that if you pick something like diet soda or regular soda, in the same case, you're more likely gonna lose weight on diet soda because you can't actually digest anything from that. Hence why there's no calories. So the same thing actually applies when you're doing protein bars versus candy bars. And also on top of that, you just have less calories in general, as I mentioned. And one of the main ingredients that he does mention is for protein. And what he says in this part, it might shock you.
Well, what's the quality of protein? Soy protein concentrate. That is a very low quality protein.
In this case, for him saying that soy concentrate or soy isolate is generally really bad for you, I would beg to differ, because there's a lot of studies and even things such as the American Heart Association that say that they recommend you to have more of soy because it's generally healthier and has more nutrients than, let's say, other types of processed foods, which makes more sense. And also soy is not as bad as people think. For example, a lot of people say, oh, you can get cancer and breast cancer and all these other things, but a lot of people don't address how much do you actually need to have these side effects. And to be honest, if you did need that many side effects, you would have to be having like a pound of it or like a block of tofu every single day. And realistically, who's having a block of tofu every single day? I can't really think of people, even vegans, that's far from it. But generally, it's pretty safe. It's not too bad. And also, it's way easier to consume in terms of protein compared to other types of protein. So for example, have you ever heard of the DIAS score or these other types of scores that rate and determine how digestible the protein is? Soy is actually way higher than most of these other things. And people might say, oh, well, it's not as good as meat though, man. Like, it's not that good. But in reality, if you compare it to something like beans, it's way better. It's more complete than, and also more digestible, and just as good as something like casein or whey protein isolate, depending on which one you get. It's really not that bad. And also, most of these protein bars don't just have soy. They also have whey protein isolate or whey protein concentrate, which are also really good for you, depending on the amount of quantities, and as long as you're not replacing it with just whole foods, you're pretty good. So the dosage really makes the poison in this. And when you're considering ingredients, they're not actually bad as candy bars, because a lot of these things I mentioned, such as like soy or whey protein isolate or concentrate, they're generally better for you than candy bars, which don't have anything. So that's why I would not say go for candy bars over protein bars, or say that they're remarkably the same in this category. I think there's definitely some benefits for protein bars. But even with these positives, Dr. Berg generally likes majoring in the minors and focuses on these specific things, such as like the glycemic index. I think this is an important thing to address.
Maltitol syrup, plus they add maltitol. It's not low on the glycemic index, and they put it in a lot of sugar-free candy, and it's the worst sugar alcohol.
And the glycemic index is not a reliable indicator of whether you're gonna gain weight or not, or how much you're actually gonna continue to eat after. So if you ever heard of Dr. Lay Norton, he makes a lot of videos, for example, on the glycemic index and weight loss in general. And I think in this case for Dr. Berg, if you're ever confused, I recommend watching his videos too. But with this overemphasis on sugar, it creates this dichotomy of, okay, well, just because it has a lot of sugar, therefore I shouldn't have it. But truth be told, a lot of sugar alcohols, specifically in protein bars and also just in things in general, have a lower glycemic index. Things such as pure sugar, which is in candy bars, have a way higher glycemic index than things like protein bars. And on top of that, and even at that, the glycemic index scale is pretty inconsistent. If you look at a typical scale, you'll find that fresh pineapple is roughly the same in terms of numbers as ice cream. But if you really think about it, taking a step back, most of these things they're not even comparable. Like, yeah, they got sugar in them, but if you look at a pineapple, it's way healthier and it has a lot more vitamins, a lot more nutrients compared to ice cream. Like, it's not even a game changer in terms of this. And as I mentioned before, if you're counting your calories and you're counting your macros, a lot of the effects of GI tend to lower, because if you're getting your protein, you're getting enough fat, and then you have something that's high in the glycemic index, protein and fat generally blunts it and it's gonna lower it anyway. So I wouldn't really stress too much on this. And even if you are someone that's like, no, I need to go low carb, I can't do this, you could still get fat on a low carb diet too. And even though that you're not getting a huge insulin response from going keto or going carnivore, you still get way fatter, and that's probable. Like, I've done it before. I still had protein bars in my diet. I still gained weight. I had protein bars in my diet and I lost weight. What's the difference? Just difference amount of calories. So it's not as bad as you think it is. So since we know that they're not actually as bad compared to all these things, what can we actually do to incorporate them in our diet? And yes, I would say that whole foods are generally better than protein bars. It's without a doubt. If you pick sweet potatoes or apples or any other types of whole foods, they're gonna be healthier than protein bars, especially with certain protein sources. But in terms of weight loss or your specific goals, having them in your day-to-day life is pretty decent and pretty convenient compared to a candy bar, because they'll actually hit your goals and they're pretty digestible, as mentioned. And it's really good if you're in a time crunch. So for example, as I mentioned, if you're in an airport, if you're in a gas station, or you can't meal prep or do anything, grabbing a protein bar really quick at like your local supplement store or even at a Walmart or Target, it's gonna be pretty decent grabbing that, knowing that you can get your macros in, and you're gonna be pretty good knowing that it can still help you out. And it's also really good if you want, let's say, do a post-workout and you don't have enough time to, let's say, go to your house and then cook, or you're gonna go somewhere after to, let's say, meet your friends. Getting a protein bar, totally fine. You gotta get some protein somewhere, especially if you're wanting to hit that daily protein goal. So I wouldn't really stress too much about it. And so earlier in this video, I mentioned that not all protein bars are created equal, and you gotta find which certain protein bars are best for you, especially when you're wanting to lose weight. Well, I actually made a video right here going over almost every popular protein bar on the market. And if you guys wanna know which one is best for you, make sure you check out this video right here, and I'll see you there in a second.